If you thought the 69 Chevelle plastic model to RC conversion was looking scale before, just wait till you see what I've got to show you all in today's video. It's finally time to finish up this custom chassis and do the first test drive. Let's hope it works. Hello everyone and welcome. I'm back today with another Chevelle update. As you'll see, this car is really starting to come together and get closer to completion, with paint finally being applied to that highly detailed chassis, which is now fully functional and able to be tested. First though, for anyone who may be new to this project, I started out with this awesome 1/25th scale 69 Chevy Chevelle SS plastic model kit from Chevelle. To transform it into a fully functional RC model, I designed and 3D printed my own custom drivetrain and suspension parts, as well as installed some of the smallest size RC components available. Previous installments in this series have focused more on the functional aspects of this project, like building the suspension and drivetrain, but with most of the hard work done, it's time to start focusing more on the appearance of this model, getting everything painted and assembled, just like you would any other static model. As always, if you'd like to check out any of the previous updates in this series, I'll have a link to the video playlist below in the description for anyone who'd like to catch up on the work that's been done so far. But let's go ahead and dive right into this latest update and, among other things, actually drive this car for the first time. As you may recall, the focus of the prior video featuring this project was the steering system. I'm overall very happy with how it turned out. The one thing I noticed with where this servo is positioned is that a little bit of material was going to need to be removed around this mount, so that the floor and inner fender piece can fit properly. I carefully marked this area and then removed it. Nice and simple. Next I went back over to the kit and cut out the engine pieces, the block and transmission in particular. Obviously, one of the final things I still need to do that's related to the functionality of this car is getting the motor mounted and connected to the rear axle with a drive shaft. After some test fits and a bit of brainstorming, I wanted to do the best that I could to conceal that functional RC motor inside of that 396 big block V8. As you'll see, this certainly required some hacking. I glued each engine half piece together and then cut out the bottom to fit around that N20 size motor and gear assembly. Fortunately, this ended up working out about as good as I could have hoped for. This 1/25th scale V8 is just large enough to fit around the motor on top, while still slotting right into the mounts positioned on the K-member, so I can ensure it will be positioned correctly when it's time to do the final assembly. You'll notice that that servo sits pretty close to the front of the engine. I considered angling it slightly out to allow some more room, but I soon changed it back when I realized that that would interfere with the radiator, as you'll soon see. In a future update, we'll see what modifications need to be made to the parts that go on the front of the engine, like the water pump, fan, and power steering pump. Obviously, some compromise will be necessary, but all things considered, I think that servo is in a pretty good position. But now that I know where the motor will fit, I can cut the drive shaft to the correct length. As always, all the 3D printable parts that I'm using for this project are available on our Patreon if you'd like to do a similar build. We also have some much easier to build 3D printable projects and chassis available over there, so keep that in mind as well if you're not interested in getting quite as detailed as what I'm doing here. But just a couple of dog bone ends are fine for this project. It's not like there's going to be that much movement from the rear suspension, so as long as it's the correct length, there's no worries about it falling out. Also, no real worries about strength and durability here. Like the gears in the rear axle, resin 3D printing drive shaft ends are fine for this project. The car is light, not too powerful, and won't be subjected to any unreasonably rough conditions, so no need to shell out for brass gears or build a more durable drive shaft than what I have here. I just cut the 2mm steel rod to the correct length, then glued on the ends, after ensuring the length is correct. With all this messing around with that motor and jamming it into the V8 engine piece, I knocked a solder joint loose that I made sure to reconnect, then tested everything to ensure it's all functioning correctly. It's only going to be getting more and more difficult to make repairs, so I want to make sure I'm testing everything as I go. Once that was done, I simply used a little dab of shoe glue to hold the motor in place. Using hardware would be ideal if it needs to be removed for maintenance, but I didn't really see an easy way of doing it, so I just used a little bit of glue, positioned it at the correct angle with a floor jack of the same scale, and then let the glue dry. That slightly downward angle will help ensure no part of the drivetrain will come into contact with the floor. No modifications to the floor pans or transmission tunnel will be necessary with this project. Next, I began test fitting some of the other parts while that glue dried, including the core support and radiator. I did some sanding in a few spots like on the hood to ensure proper fitment, but I'll be doing more of that later on when it's time to work on the body. Right now the main focus was on the radiator and core support and seeing how they might interfere with the servo. They just barely fit into place without mods being needed. However, the fan shroud does need to be cut. I also cleaned up the firewall and ensured proper fitment of that piece, as well as the interior. After some time spent test fitting and brainstorming, I determined that the body would be kind of difficult to remove for changing the battery, so I decided to make the trunk removable by carefully cutting it out with a sharp hobby knife. Once it was removed, I sanded the outer edges to ensure a clean look and a good fit. There's plenty of room for the electronics in the rear, now with easy access. I'll probably place some magnets in the back to hold the trunk in place, but I'll work on that in a future update. Both the ESC and receiver will be placed in the rear along with the battery. The wires can be ran along the outer edges of the body. There'll be plenty of room in this area between the body and interior, which will keep them out of sight. But after all the custom work and test fits, it's now time to get this chassis painted. One final thing I did before painting this floor piece was sand away this text on the bottom. It's not like it's all that noticeable, but I might as well take a moment to remove it and try and make the appearance of this car as lifelike as possible, both on the bottom and the top. After that, I spray painted this piece satin black. At this point, the glue on the motor had dried, so I removed the wheels and began painting the chassis. I started with a thin black wash around the moving parts to try and prevent them from getting stuck together with paint. I also used the black wash on the wheels to help improve the appearance of them. As you can see on the real thing, these intersections here should be black. I just applied the paint to these lower areas and then wiped away any paint from the raised areas. This model kit includes both the GM Rally and Magnum 500 wheel options. I went with the Magnum wheels for my build. Honestly, they look even better in person than they show up here on camera. They're looking great, no doubt, but there's still one thing that's missing, and that's the SS center caps for each wheel. I simply applied these water slide decals and later applied a gloss clear coat over top to protect them. Carefully, I applied some matte black paint to the chassis, again making sure not to gum up any of the moving parts. This chassis is really starting to look good, with those custom, functional 3D printed RC parts that I made blending right in. Now, painting the chassis when everything is put together and fully assembled like it is here is obviously not ideal. It would be much better to paint all of these parts individually and then do the assembly. The reason for me not doing this though is once I got this chassis put together and fully functional, making any modifications as necessary, I didn't want to have to take it all apart and reassemble it again. So I just decided it would be easier to paint everything when it's all put together like this. I did later realize that it would probably be a good idea to paint the outer portions of these inner wheel pieces right here, as there are some openings in the wheels that I don't want the white to show through. It's probably not a big deal either way, but no worries now about any of that white showing through. After some time had passed, the clear coat on the wheels was dry, so they could be installed along with those great looking pad printed Firestone tires. I did some quick sanding along the outer edges of each tire to help remove any imperfections and make them look a little bit more worn, hopefully making them look more lifelike as well. Definitely some good looking wheels. At this point, the paint on the floor piece was now dry. I painted the trunk area that was covered with tape earlier by hand. Not like this area needs to be perfect, so a quick splash of paint is all this area needs. I test fit the frame and then test fit the exhaust as well. These exhaust pieces just barely fit with that rear axle in place. I actually ended up breaking off this little end on one of them, so I decided to cut each of them into 2 separate pieces to make installing them later a lot easier. But now that I know that they fit, I repaired the piece that I had broke by heating up a metal pin and then securing it in place. After that, I applied some steel paint to each one. Once that was done, I tested the electronics one final time just to make sure everything was still working as it should before I finally glued the chassis to the floor. I did go ahead and do some minor weathering on each of the pieces before gluing. I'm not at all going for a patina look on this car, but just wanted to add a slight amount of dirt and wear to the bottom, just some very subtle weathering on the undercarriage. I glued the electronics in the rear just in front of where the battery will go, and at this point I had to install the body to see how this car was looking so far. The alignment and the ride height is looking pretty good, probably won't mess with any of that. The body is certainly somewhat of a snug fit, so hopefully it won't be too difficult to install later on. But I'm glad I decided to remove the trunk for easy access to the battery, as that's definitely going to be a better solution than having to remove the body every time. Obviously, it still needs to be painted, but already it's looking really cool, and I'm certainly excited to see how it's going to look once finished. Undercarriage is definitely looking the part. It looks like it had an undercoating applied, as from the factory, I don't think everything underneath would be painted black, but doing things this way is definitely easier, just painting it all the same color. And then I'm really happy with that subtle weathering as well. I'll be doing a little more later on, but right now I powered on the car, adjusted the directions and endpoints on the transmitter, and then finally did the first test drive of this Chevelle. It's very satisfying to see this custom-built car working just like it's supposed to. No issues on the first drive other than the battery fell out, which I think may have ripped out this wire that connects the receiver to the ESC. After I got that soldered back on, I drove the car for a while and it's working great. It drives smooth, steers well, there's at least some suspension movement when it goes over the bumps, which is nice to see. The only thing that I thought could use a little more work was the left wheel was rubbing against the chassis when turning left past a certain angle, which I figured I could fix with some sanding. I found the spot where it was rubbing from this missing paint right here, and then removed some material from this section. I also installed the exhaust. It took quite a bit of glue to get the 2 sets of exhaust pieces secured together, but I was able to get everything into place and did one final round of painting and weathering. Without a doubt, a solid foundation for this highly detailed Chevelle that works about as good as I could have hoped for. Certainly with hindsight, there's maybe a few minor things I could have done differently next time, but overall I'm very pleased with how it's coming together. Like I've said before, with these types of super scale plastic model to RC conversions, I'm not concerned with high speed performance, I just want it to work well and look super scale. That said though, the 4000 RPM N20 motor installed currently has a nice amount of pep and some good torque, though only being powered by a 1S Lightboat doesn't unleash its full potential. At this point, the car is fully functional with only the cosmetic aspects being left to complete. I'll have to do some modifications under the hood to get everything in the engine bay to fit, but aside from that, I can basically just build the car exactly as instructed. I expect that to be the easy and fun part, so hopefully that proves to be the case. Of course, be sure to stay tuned for more on that process. I'm really excited to wrap up this project, and I hope you all are as well. Of course, a huge thanks to all of you for watching and following along, and a huge thanks to all of our channel members and members over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. As I said, the STL files for these custom 3D printed parts I'm using are available for download over on our Patreon, along with many other different chassis designs and accessories, all of which have been showcased here on the channel previously. But whatever you're working on, I hope you found this video entertaining and inspiring, and maybe even helpful if you're interested in doing a similar project to this. But that's all I've got for you with today's video. Be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see some more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.